Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're embarking on a really fascinating journey. We're going into how we study and understand human societies, especially cultures maybe far from our own.
Yeah, think of it like a detective story. But instead of a crime, we're sort of solving the puzzle of how knowledge itself gets created.
And sometimes, how it gets miscreated, right?
Exactly. So our mission for you listening in is to unpack two big kind of linked ideas. First, we'll spotlight a remarkable figure, LKA and Ananthakrishna Iyer.
A real pioneer of Indian anthropology. We'll see how his groundbreaking work actually being there totally reshaped things.
And second, we'll dive deep into these two powerful concepts, Orientalism and Indology.
And these aren't just like dusty academic terms. They really show how the way we've thought about whole cultures, especially from the East, has been shaped by some surprising things.
Influences, yeah. And sometimes, let's be honest, outright biases. We're going to pull out the most important nuggets, the key insights, and really focus on why these historical ideas still matter to you today. What's jumping out at you as we talk through this?
Exactly. Think of it as getting a shortcut, sort of, to being really well informed about how different viewpoints have shaped how we see cultures, India in particular.
You should walk away with a fresh lens, a new way to look at information about any culture. Okay, let's get into it. LKA Ananthakrishna Iyer, the pioneer from India.
Okay, so let's start with this incredible person, LKA Ananthakrishna Iyer. When you hear pioneer of anthropology, you probably picture, a lifelong academic.
Right, someone always in the university system.
But what's so fascinating here is his journey. It was anything but a straight line into academia.
Indeed. He was born in 1861, and he actually started his career as a clerk. Then he became a science teacher, even a school headmaster.
So not an anthropologist initially at all.
Not at all. His life took this amazing turn in 1902. The Diwan of Cochin, think of him as the chief minister of that state back then, asked Aiyer to do an ethnographic survey of the region.
Okay, that sounds like a big job.
It was, and here's the real kicker. It was an honorary job. Purely voluntary.
Wait, honorary? So unpaid, while he was still teaching?
Exactly. Imagine this. He spent his weekends as the superintendent of ethnography doing this huge survey while teaching full-time Monday to Friday.
Wow, so he was literally a weekend ethnographer. That's incredible dedication for an honorary role. What came out of that? What did that weekend work produce?
Well, the results were just monumental. This huge effort led to his famous publication, Tribes and Castes of Cochin. It came out between 1904 and 1906.
Okay.
He compiled it from 12 detailed studies, these monographs, into two big volumes. The first one focused on hill and jungle tribes and lower castes. And the second covered higher social groups like Nambudris and Brahmins. And this work, it was so good, it got praise from the top anthropologists of the time. People like E.B. Tyler and W.H.R. Rivers, big names.
Okay, so here's where it gets really interesting for me. His approach. How did he actually do these studies? Especially since the field was so new then.
Yeah.
Why was his method so important for the time?
He was incredibly innovative, really ahead of his time. He just flat out rejected the usual administrative way of collecting data.
Which was what, usually? Just sending out forms?
Pretty much, yeah. Questionnaires, official reports, very detached. Instead, Aiyer really emphasized interacting with people directly right there in their natural environment.
So getting out there.
Yes. And he was one of the first to really stress how crucial participant observation was for fieldwork.
Okay, let's break that down for listeners. Participant observation. What did that actually mean back then, and why was it such a big shift?
Great question.
Yeah.
It meant you didn't just, watch people from a distance or rely on what others told you. You actually aimed to live among them, participate in their daily lives, their routines, their ceremonies as much as possible to gain a deeper, more, empathetic understanding.
So experiencing it alongside them, not just asking about it.
Exactly. And this hands-on method, it was revolutionary. It gave a much richer, much more accurate picture than just compiling data sent back to an office.
Makes sense.
And he even adapted the standard survey format. There was this rigid 27-point system used elsewhere. He modified it to a 14-point one he felt was more suitable for India.
More culturally sensitive, maybe?
Yes, covering detailed things like origins, marriage customs, religion, occupation, even physical characteristics. Very thorough.
It sounds incredibly detailed and also really respectful of the people he was studying. And he wasn't afraid to challenge conventional thinking either, was he? Like looking at communities others ignored.
Precisely. At that time, most anthropologists were only interested in, quote, pre-literate communities.
Meaning groups without written languages?
Right. But Aiyer, he chose to study literate groups too, like the Nambudris, the Nayars, Syrian Christians, groups with long histories of writing.
That's a significant difference.
It was. And he also paid close attention to the changes happening. He noted the negative impacts of modernity as he saw it. For instance, he observed how contact with people from the plains could sometimes deprive tribal groups like the Kadars of their simple habits. He talked about a dilapidated cultural condition resulting from that contact.
Interesting. So what does all this add up to for his legacy? How did this, self-taught weekend ethnographer actually influence the whole field of anthropology, not just in India, but maybe wider?
Well, his career path basically laid the foundation for the entire discipline in India. In 1916, he gave what were essentially the first lectures on ethnology in India at Madras University.
Okay.
Then in 1920, he became a lecturer in anthropology at Calcutta University. And there, he set up the very first anthropology postgraduate course and department in the whole country.
Oh, the first one.
The first one. He kept working too, did an ethnographic survey of Mysore, which resulted in 4 more volumes. After he retired, he lectured across Europe, got international honors, France, Italy.
So he got recognized internationally.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
His commitment to what he called scientific skepticism and his rigorous methods, they made him a real guiding light for the next generations. He truly laid the essential, solid brickwork, you could say, for Indian anthropology.
So reflecting on Iyer's story, what can you, the listener, take away from it? For me, it's a powerful reminder. Groundbreaking knowledge often comes from people willing to challenge the status quo,
Yeah, to step outside the established academic box.
and to dive deep into real-world experience and genuinely engage with the people they're studying. True scholarship isn't always just in libraries. Sometimes it starts with a part-time passion project.
How the West viewed the East.
Okay, so Iyer showed us the power of understanding a culture from the inside, right? Through direct engagement, respect. But what happens when understanding is kind of imposed from the outside, often with political agendas or preconceived ideas mixed in?
That's exactly where this next concept comes in, Orientalism. It's a challenging idea, but really important.
So what is Orientalism? Why is it such a big deal?
Well, the scholar Edward Said, in his hugely influential 1978 book, also called Orientalism, he completely redefined the term.
How so? What was it before?
Before Said, Orientalism basically just meant the study of the Orient, the East, its languages, cultures, pretty straightforward academic field.
Right.
But Said shifted the focus entirely. He wasn't just looking at the study itself, but how the West, which he called the Occident, thinking mainly of Britain and France because of their colonial power, and later the US, how they viewed, stereotyped, and ultimately dominated the East.
So it's not just what they studied, but crucially how it was framed, presented through a very specific, maybe biased lens.
Exactly. Said argued Orientalism wasn't just neutral study, it was a systematic discipline, a way European culture actively managed and even produced the Orient.
Produced? How do you mean?
Well, politically, socially, imaginatively, he believed the West controlled this image through its dominant power structures. You'd find these specific images and representations everywhere: literature, art, films, travel writing.
Okay, I see. Creating a certain picture.
Right. And often, the East and West were set up as binary opposites. The West was rational, superior, progressive. The East, irrational, exotic, maybe sensual, but ultimately backward and needing Western guidance.
And this image wasn't just academic, it had real-world consequences.
Absolutely. Said argued this manufactured image was used to justify colonial rule, to make it seem natural, even necessary, and it helped suppress the Orient's own voice, its true identity.
Can you give an example maybe related to India?
Sure. In India's case, colonial historians often divided Indian history into these religion-dominated phases, Hindu period, Muslim period, and then place themselves at the top as the modern rational era.
Yep.
Right.
And Sayed and others argued this way of framing history tragically fueled divisions, contributing to things like the tensions leading up to the partition of India.
That's a really powerful and, frankly, quite unsettling idea. That knowledge itself can be a form of power used to control and justify actions. But did everyone just accept Said's argument? Was it controversial?
Oh, definitely controversial.
Yeah.
And not everyone agreed entirely. For instance, the scholar Simit Sarkar argued that, Orientalism didn't always paint India negatively.
So some nuance there.
Yes. Sarkar pointed out that sometimes, especially earlier on, Indian civilization was actually cast in a more positive light, even glorified by some Western scholars. He also stressed that India wasn't just passively receiving Western ideas, it has always been a generator of knowledge itself.
That's important. So this raises a really crucial question for you listening. When you come across information about a different culture, especially one with a complex colonial history, how does the lens, the perspective it's presented through, affect what you actually see? Are you always aware of potential biases in the news, in books, even just casual conversations about other parts of the world?
It's something to think about every single time you consume information about somewhere else, isn't it?
Studying India through different lenses.
Okay, so closely related to Orientalism, and maybe even more specific to India, is this term Indology. What exactly is Indology? How does it fit into this whole picture?
Right. Indology is basically two things. It's an approach to studying Indian society, and it's also a specific academic field.
And what does it focus on?
It mainly focuses on Indian languages, beliefs, customs, rituals, culture, but often, and this is key, relying very heavily on ancient Indian literature, things like the Vedas, the Puranas.
So studying India primarily through its historical texts.
That's a good way to put it, yes.
Right.
Particularly the classical, often Sanskrit texts.
Okay. And who are the early figures in this field? How did it get started?
Well, William Jones, who famously founded the Asiatic Society of Bengal back in the late 18th century, he's considered a real pioneer, along with others like Henry Thomas Colebrook.
And this text-based approach, did it influence Indian scholars too?
Yes, it did. It influenced many Indian anthropologists later on, like G. S. Aguri, who we'll probably mention again.
Now, you mentioned earlier that Orientalism sometimes glorified India. It sounds like Indology might have had similar phases, like shifting attitudes.
Exactly. You can kind of broadly divide early Indology into two camps or phases, sometimes called the Indo-maniac phase and the Indo-phobic phase.
Indo-maniac, tell me about that.
Okay, so the Indo-maniacs, as they were later dubbed, presented this largely glorified picture of ancient Indian civilization. People like William Jones, for instance, he actually believed Indians and Europeans were originally kin, part of the same family tree.
Really?
Yeah, and he famously suggested Sanskrit was more perfect, more refined than even ancient Greek or Latin.
Wow.
Max Mueller, another huge figure who translated the Rig Veda, also fits this mold. He promoted this idea of an Aryan brotherhood, suggesting that upper castes in India shared a common racial origin with Europeans. A very influential, though now heavily criticized, idea.
Okay, so that's the glorification part. What about the Indo-phobic view? That sounds like the complete opposite.
It absolutely was, a stark contrast. This view became much more dominant later, especially as British control shifted from the East India Company directly to the British Crown after 1857.
So a political shift influencing the academic view.
Seems very likely. Suddenly the view changed. Indians, who were once seen perhaps as ancient kin, were now often portrayed as savage people. Their society was described as traditional, orthodox, stagnant, full of inequality, especially regarding women.
And who are the key figures pushing this view?
People like James Mill. He wrote a massively influential multi-volume history of British India without ever actually visiting India, by the way.
Seriously.
And he portrayed India as, well, backward. A land of snake charmers ruled by systematic despotism, harsh, unchallenged power with no concept of individual liberty. He argued that colonial intervention, even missionary work, was essential to civilize Indians.
That's a very negative portrayal.
Extremely. Even Karl Marx, in a different context, suggested India was basically a civilization with no history of its own, just a place repeatedly invaded and conquered.
So this drastic shift from romanticizing India to demonizing it seems really tied to the political goals of empire. But surely, Indians themselves didn't just accept this negative portrayal. Did they start pushing back?
Absolutely. This negative turn directly led to what's called the rise of indigenous Indology. It was a reaction against those hostile views.
So Indian scholars reclaiming the narrative.
Exactly. Scholars, often Indian themselves, started providing alternative interpretations of ancient Indian literature. They presented a much more positive, sometimes equally glorified version of Indian society and its past.
Like who?
Well, G. S. Aguri, whom I mentioned earlier, is a key figure here. He argued that Indian civilization was largely a product of the Vedic era, emphasizing its achievements. He also tried to blend Indology with other anthropological ideas like diffusionism, a cultural trait spread which helped bring sociology and anthropology together in India.
Okay, so Indology clearly contributed a lot, especially in preserving and studying ancient texts. But it must have had its downsides or limitations, right? What were the main criticisms?
Oh, definitely. A major critique, and it's a big one, is that Indology often presents a book view of India.
A book view, meaning?
Meaning it relies so heavily on ancient texts that it struggles to capture the messy, complex, dynamic reality of living Indian society. It can make India seem static, unchanging, fixed in the past.
Which is obviously not the case for any society.
Right. The sociologist Aiyer, for example, was very critical. He argued that just looking at India through this cultural, textual lens, as Indology often did, completely misses the real India.
What did he mean by the real India?
He meant the India with all its vast diversity, its deep-rooted inequalities, its ongoing social exploitation and struggles. Desai basically said you have to move way beyond Guri's text-focused view to even begin understanding modern India's real problems and challenges.
That makes sense. Any other limitations?
Another one is that this focus on ancient, often Hindu, texts frequently overlooks or downplays the massive contributions of non-Hindu rulers and communities to India's history. Think about art, architecture, literature, technology, administration, huge influences that a purely Vedic-centric view might miss.
So it could present a skewed or incomplete picture. What can you, the listener, take away from this look at Indology? For me, it highlights the danger of relying only on written texts, especially ancient ones, to understand a living, breathing culture.
Yeah, what crucial things get missed? What voices aren't heard in those texts?
Exactly. What's missing from just a book view when you're trying to grasp the full, dynamic picture of a society today? It really makes you question the sources we rely on for any subject, doesn't it? 4, connecting the threads. Different ways of knowing.
So if we try and pull all these threads together now, connect them to the bigger picture, we've really seen two very different ways of trying to understand societies, sometimes almost opposing ways.
Yeah, on one side, you have someone like LKA and Ananthakrishna Iyer. His approach was all about, getting your hands dirty, on-the-ground field work, participant observation, really focusing on details and respecting local lived experiences.
He was about experiencing the culture, immersing himself in it.
Right. And then on the other side, we have Orientalism and Indology, which, well, at least at times, seem to have created stories, narratives based more on political agendas or analysis of very specific texts, or maybe just predetermined biases coming from a particular, often Western viewpoint.
It really throws into sharp relief how the position of the observer, their background, their power, their assumptions, can powerfully shape what they see.
And not just what they see, but what they end up believing is the truth about another group of people.
Exactly. Which brings up a really fundamental question, I think. When we try to understand any culture, or honestly, even just a complex topic we're interested in, whose voice are we actually prioritizing?
Whose perspective gets centered?
Yeah. And how might the methods we use to gather knowledge, are we talking to people? Are we reading old texts? Are we looking at statistics? How might those methods profoundly shape the truth we ultimately construct or believe?
It makes you realize that what seems like a solid fact from one angle
could look deeply flawed, maybe even harmful from another perspective. It suggests that truth itself can be contested, built on sometimes quite shaky foundations, depending on how you look.
which just highlights how incredibly important it is to look at sources really carefully, to always be asking, where is this information coming from?
Who is telling the story and why? What might be their agenda or just their unconscious blind spots?
It's about being a critical thinker, isn't it? Especially today, in a world just flooded with information from all sides. V comprehensive recap for active recall. Okay, let's do a quick recap. Just nail down the core insights we've talked about to really help lock them into your memory. Make sure those key takeaways stick.
Good idea. So first up, LKA and Ananthakrishna Iyer. What's the key lesson there? For me, it's the power of on-the-ground immersion and challenging the norms.
Right. Remember his journey? Weekend ethnographer, basically, founding India's first anthropology department.
And his emphasis on participant observation, really respecting local knowledge. His story teaches us about scholarship that gets real, that engages with actual life.
Okay. Then Orientalism. The big takeaway there.
It taught us how power dynamics can shape narratives about other cultures. Edward Said showed how the West often manufactured an image of the East,
Creating stereotypes, often negative ones, maybe to justify colonial rule, presenting the East as the binary opposite of the West, rational versus irrational, etc.
Exactly. It's a powerful example of how knowledge itself can be tangled up with power, used almost as a tool of control.
And finally, Indology. What did we learn there?
Indology showed us how India was studied through different, often biased textual lenses. Remember the Indo-maniacs who glorified ancient India?
Contrasting sharply with the Indo-phobics who painted it as backward and despotic.
Which then led to the rise of indigenous Indology, offering a more internal, positive view, but still often text-focused.
And the key limitation, that book view, right? Often missing the dynamic, complex, sometimes unequal realities of modern India.
Precisely. So the big overarching takeaway from all three, it seems profoundly simple, but it's huge. How knowledge gets created, who is creating it, and what their underlying motivations or biases might be. All of that massively impacts our understanding of the world.
It's not just about what you know, but how you know it, and critically, from whose perspective you're learning it. Outro.
So thinking about everything we've covered,
Yeah.
From Ayer's incredibly detailed hands-on fieldwork
To the complex power dynamics wrapped up in Orientalism and those shifting, contrasting views within Indology.
it really makes you stop and think about how we acquire knowledge, doesn't it?
Yeah. What does it truly mean to know another culture? Or really any topic you're interested in? Are you settling for the book view, maybe just a historical interpretation?
Or are you trying to dig deeper into the lived experiences, the diverse perspectives that exist now?
And are you actively acknowledging the biases that might be embedded in the information you're getting? It's a constant process, really.
We hope this deep dive has given you plenty to mull over, perhaps even inspired you to look at the sources of your own knowledge, whatever the subject, with a fresh, more critical eye.
Keep exploring, keep asking questions.
And thanks for joining us for this deep dive.